She didn't know her mother was awake when she whispered, "Just die already." The IV beeped steadily. My eyes stayed closed, but my ears heard everything, and my heart turned to steel. By the time my daughter forged my will and tried to sell my house, I was already 3 steps ahead. She thought I was dying quietly. She didn't know I'd rise to bury her betrayal in court. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. She didn't know I was still conscious, but I heard her, every vile syllable. The IV beeped in a steady rhythm beside my bed, keeping time like a metronome for the silent, sterile chaos of the cardiac recovery ward. My eyes were closed, my body still. But my ears were alive. Footsteps padded softly across the tile, too light for a nurse, too sharp to be gentle. Then, her voice. Kayla. She didn't sigh, she didn't whisper. She muttered, just loud enough to think I wouldn't catch it, just soft enough to preserve her image if someone passed by. Just die already. 3 words, syllables that sliced sharper than any scalpel in the operating room. My breath stayed even. Years of motherhood teach you how to hide pain. But inside, something cracked, not in fear, not in sorrow, in clarity. I wasn't dying, I was waking up. Kayla stood at the foot of my bed like she owned the place, hair pulled tight, nails perfect, her phone glowing in one hand as she scrolled mindlessly, waiting, not for me to recover, but for me to go. She didn't know the drugs had worn off hours ago. The nurses had praised my post-op strength. "Mrs. Atwood, you're recovering faster than we expected." But I hadn't told anyone. Not yet. I wanted to see what the world looked like when people thought I wasn't watching. Now I knew. In that moment, I wasn't in a hospital. I was standing inside every moment I had let slide, every time I'd watched her roll her eyes during holidays, every demand for help that came dressed as entitlement, the first time she asked to be added to my accounts, just in case. The second time she told a friend I was mostly a burden now. The time she stood by my bed during my first surgery and insisted on power of attorney while I was still groggy from anesthesia. I had given her everything, my time, my savings, my patience, and I'd explained it all away, told myself she was tired, stressed, misunderstood. But now I knew. She wasn't tired. She was waiting. The door creaked open. A nurse stepped in, clipboard in hand, a tray of pills in the other. "Morning, sweetheart," the nurse chirped, glancing between Kayla and me. "Time for meds." Kayla turned on her smile like flipping a light switch. "Oh, good, she's still resting," she said sweetly, brushing a non-existent piece of lint from my blanket. "She's had such a rough time. My poor mom." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I listened, watched from behind lowered lids as the nurse gave a sympathetic nod and handed Kayla a schedule of visiting hours. "Doctor says if she keeps healing like this, she might be home in a week," the nurse added. "Heart of a lion, this one." Kayla's smile dimmed for half a second. Then she glanced at her phone and muttered something about needing to check on paperwork. I waited until the nurse stepped out, until the door clicked softly shut, until Kayla reached for her bag like she was ready to leave with nothing but the house keys and her fake sympathy. Then I opened my eyes. Not wide, just enough for her to see me, to know. She froze, her hand halfway to the door handle. My throat still burned from the ventilator tube. My voice rasped like sandpaper over glass, but it came out clear. "Not yet." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I held her gaze, unblinking, unmoved. There was no drama in my voice, no fury, just truth. Her face turned gray, like the blood drained all at once. "Mom?" she stammered. "You're awake?" I didn't answer, because it didn't matter. She already knew she'd said too much, and I'd heard enough to rewrite everything. The house felt colder than the hospital room had. Or maybe it was just the absence of illusion. No beeping monitors, no sterile sympathy. Just the weight of betrayal settling into the carpet like dust no vacuum could reach. I moved slowly. My body still ached from the surgery, tight in the chest, swollen in the limbs, but I didn't need full strength for what I was about to do. I just needed memory and records. In the hall closet, behind the outdated board games and a box of unopened Christmas lights, sat the file cabinet I hadn't touched since before my first bypass. The one with every check, invoice, and tuition bill I'd ever paid. Kayla always said I kept too much. But now I knew why I had. I pulled the first drawer open and began to sift. Daycare forms from 1990, medical bills from her teenage scoliosis surgery, a crumpled payment plan for her college apartment in Baltimore. She'd promised to pay it. Back insisted the summer waitressing job would cover it. It never did. Private school fees, co-signatures on 3 different car loans, none of which had my name when they were sold, a down payment on her first condo, which she later refinanced to buy out her then-boyfriend, and never told me. Every page was an echo, a line drawn through my savings, a compromise she'd dressed up as gratitude but wore like entitlement, and then, near the bottom of the second drawer, a document I had forgotten existed, durable power of attorney, signed April 3, 2017. I stared at it. My signature at the bottom was thin, weak, the way ink looks when your hand is shaking from anesthesia. I remembered that day. Surgery prep. Nurses all around. Kayla leaning in close, her voice honeyed and urgent. "Just in case, Mom. It's only temporary." She'd kissed my forehead. I'd signed without reading. The ache in my chest returned, not physical, not surgical, just heartbreak, dull and deep. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. "Margaret?" a voice answered, familiar and cautious. "Hi, Joel. I need you to check something for me, quietly." Joel Silverman had been my accountant for 12 years, until Kayla convinced me to switch to her more modern firm. Joel had never asked questions about the decision, but now he didn't hesitate to say, "Come by tomorrow. I'll clear my afternoon." "No," I said. "I need you to look now." I made tea I didn't drink while I waited. He called back 20 minutes later. "Margaret, this isn't going to be easy to hear. Try me. She's been rerouting recurring charges to your accounts for over a year. Insurance, utilities, even some of her fiancé's business debts. She's listed you as a financial guarantor on at least 2 private loans." I closed my eyes. "Without my consent?" "There's consent on file," he said quietly, "but I know your signature, Margaret. That isn't it." I could hear him flipping through paperwork. "She's drained close to $38,000 across 3 checking accounts. Some of the movements were disguised as routine transfers." I said nothing. I didn't have to. The silence told him everything. "I can refer you to a forensic accountant," Joel offered. "But you're going to need legal eyes on this." I thanked him and hung up. Then I opened my bank app. The numbers spun. Logged in. My main account appeared, $432.07. I blinked. Refreshed. Still $432.07? Savings? Less than $2,000. The emergency account I'd kept for hospital bills? Closed. The floor didn't fall out from under me. I had already hit bottom. This was just confirmation. She hadn't just planned for my death. She'd funded her life with it. And now? I was done footing the bill. I consulted my attorney and found a newly filed will that she never signed. The signature was too neat. That was the first red flag. Even before my second heart surgery, my hand had trembled when I signed anything important. But this one, this curving, confident Margaret D. Atwood, was the script of someone sure they'd never be caught. I looked up from the document, my eyes narrowing at the young paralegal who'd just slid it across the conference room table. "Where did this come from?" I asked, voice low but steady. Ben Kavanaugh, my attorney for nearly 15 years, leaned forward and adjusted his glasses. "Kayla submitted it last month, filed electronically through a third-party notary service, claims you wanted to simplify estate matters after your latest health scare." "She used my bypass as a business opportunity," I muttered. Ben didn't smile. He never did in meetings like this. "It gives her full control over the property, your accounts, and medical decisions. If it were real, it would override the older version we filed 2 years ago." I slid the page back toward him. "It's not real." That's what I thought. His tone was clipped, clinical, but his eyes had softened with something that almost resembled pity. I didn't want pity. I wanted proof. He pulled out a yellow legal pad, flipping to a fresh page. Let's talk next steps. I nodded. Start with a formal audit. 2 years minimum. I want every transaction reviewed. Bank, mortgage, utilities, wire transfers. If a dollar moved, I want to know where it went. He scribbled quickly, not pausing. You think she's been at this that long? I think she started long before I got sick. This isn't panic spending, it's a pattern. Ben paused, finally meeting my eyes again. Margaret, this is textbook elder fraud, but proving intent and coercion is uphill. I'm good with uphill, I said. I'm not 6 feet under yet, am I? He cracked a smile at that, brief but real. You'll need a forensic document examiner. I'll reach out to a guy in Asheville. He's done estate cases like this before. And the signature? If it's forged, we can prove it, but it won't be enough on its own. We'll need a timeline, communications, emails, texts, anything showing she started isolating. Or manipulating you. I sat back, letting the truth wash over me like ice water. Kayla hadn't just crossed a line, she'd paved over it and built a driveway. Ben? I said after a beat. She made herself the executor? He nodded. Sole. It's clean, no contingencies, no shared oversight. And this was notarized? He held up the document. Electronically. The service is real, but there's no video verification. The platform relies on submitted ID and e-signature, which means anyone with a scan of your driver's license and access to your email could push it through. I thought back to my recovery period. The nurse had mentioned Kayla helping sort out the mail, clearing emails, unsubscribing from spam. It had sounded like kindness at the time. Now it sounded like groundwork. Ben closed the folder with a soft snap and leaned forward. Margaret, I'm going to be honest. If you hadn't caught this now, and if you had passed away, I'd be buried under the lie. He nodded. I stood slowly, heart tight but lungs full. This wasn't just about getting my money back. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about rewriting the ending she thought she could finish without me. Ben gathered the documents and walked me to the door. I turned as I stepped into the hallway. Anything else I should know? He hesitated, his mouth opening, then closing again. Finally, he reached for his phone and pulled up a photo. You're going to want to sit down for this. He showed me the screen, a real estate listing. My house, under contract, listed as motivated seller, great investment property. The color drained from my face. She's already trying to sell it? I whispered. Ben nodded grimly. Margaret, you'll need to move fast. The first thing I saw when I stepped into my own hallway was a moving box labeled Mom's Bedroom, Donate. Black marker, block letters, like I was already a memory. Like I was no longer expected to walk through the door I'd paid off over 30 years ago. The second thing I noticed was the silence. That particular kind of silence that follows betrayal, not grief, not confusion, just cold calculation. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer felt accusatory. From the kitchen I heard the refrigerator open, then Kayla's voice, sweetened and too casual. Oh, you're home. I stepped in slowly. My cane tapped the tile with purpose. She turned around wearing that tight smile she reserved for neighbors and funeral luncheons. The doctors said you'd be transferred to the rehab center on Fairview. She grabbed a glass and filled it from the fridge's water spout, stalling. You weren't supposed to be discharged for another change of plans, I interrupted. Turns out I recover better in my own bed, assuming I still have one. Her smile faltered. Of course you do. I looked past her to the stack of labeled boxes on the dining room table. Pantry, cell, books, donate, guest room, trash. Not a single label said keep. She sipped the water like it could wash the guilt off her teeth. I didn't call her out, not yet. I was still gathering. I spent the afternoon quietly, resting. That's what she called it anyway. I sat in my room, blinds cracked, while she paced the house on the phone. I caught fragments. Just need a few more days? No, she doesn't suspect anything. Signing power is already mine, we're just finalizing. By dinner, she brought me toast and lukewarm soup on a tray. Thought something light might help. Her eyes scanned me like a patient instead of a person. You're always so thoughtful, I said softly, offering a practiced smile. Remind me again, who's our banking rep at Central Credit? Her fingers twitched. Oh, I don't remember his name. Why? Just curious. I was thinking of updating some paperwork. Her mouth opened, then closed. You should rest. Let me take care of that. Of course. She left the room faster than she'd entered. I waited 5 full minutes, then reached into the drawer where I'd hidden a prepaid phone I'd bought before the surgery, just in case. Just in case turned out to be prophetic. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. The lobby smelled of printer toner and corporate air conditioning. A man in a maroon tie introduced himself as Jason. How can I help you today, Mrs. Atwood? I smiled tightly. I need full transaction histories on all accounts associated with my name, 2 years back. Printed. He hesitated. I'll need to confirm your ID. I handed him my license, watched as he typed, waited. Then his eyes flicked up. It says here the account is joint. With who? He turned the screen to show me. Kayla D. Atwood, co-owner, added May 11th, 2021. No authorization, no discussion, just theft in cursive. I didn't approve that, I said. I'll escalate this. Do that. Also, I added, my voice even, print everything. I want physical copies, withdrawals, transfers, checks, all of it. He nodded and walked off in a hurry. That afternoon, I booked an appointment with the title officer listed on the online property listing Ben had shown me. Her name was Cynthia, and she looked like someone who enjoyed shutting scams down for sport. Ms. Atwood, she said, flipping through her folder. I thought the power of sale was already authorized. It's not, I said. Well, then this just got interesting. I returned home just after sunset. The lights were off, but the glow from the front porch exposed something I hadn't seen before. There, dug into the lawn where I used to plant tulips with Kayla when she was 8, stood a tall white post. A red and white sign swung gently in the wind. For sale. Motivated seller. Move-in ready. I stepped up to it slowly, placed my hand on the wood, and steadied my breath. Not ready, I whispered. Not by a damn mile. The petition hit the courthouse clerk's desk at 9:01 a.m., sharp, signed, sealed, and backed by 2 years of financial malpractice. Ben had printed 3 bound copies with gold-stamped tabs, each section color-coded for fraud, forgery, and forced control. It read like a crime novel. Only this time the victim wasn't fiction. By 11:15, a process server in a black windbreaker strolled into Magnolia and Pine Real Estate, where Kayla sat in a glass office, legs crossed, voice syrupy sweet as she tried closing on my house. He handed her the envelope with the ease of someone delivering birthday cards. "You've been served," she blinked, then laughed like it was a joke. Until she opened it. Until she read the bolded heading, Petition to freeze asset transfers pending elder fraud investigation, filed by Margaret D. Atwood. "She's what?" she shouted, loud enough for the front desk to flinch. Ben and I watched the security footage 2 hours later in his office, the sound slightly muffled but the expressions crystal clear. "Not so charming without her soft filter on," Ben murmured. I sat straighter in the leather chair. "Play it again." We did, twice. That night, the forged will landed in the hands of a forensic document examiner named Darlene Price. Darlene didn't believe in pleasantries, just pressure analysis and curve strokes. She held up the fake signature and clicked her tongue. "Your E's don't loop like this," she muttered. "And the pen pressure is too consistent. This wasn't signed in a hospital bed, it was signed on a kitchen island with intent and coffee nearby." "I knew it," I said. "Oh, honey," she smiled. "We'll prove it." By Thursday morning, Kayla's card statements had been subpoenaed. Ben laid the printouts across his conference table like a buffet of greed. $1,240 at a spa in Scottsdale. $5,900 to a cosmetic surgery center in Raleigh. 2 plane tickets to Cabo. Non-refundable. She was spending like you were already dead, Ben muttered. She almost made it true, I said quietly. He glanced at me. You still want to go through with the deposition? Yes, I said, but I'm not the first one who needs to talk. We called Nurse Kelly Thomas that afternoon. She was the one who had changed my IV bag the morning Kayla muttered her infamous line. She showed up to Ben's office wearing scrubs and a braided bun, professionalism radiating off her like antiseptic. She thought your mother was sedated, Kelly said to the court reporter. But her eyelids were fluttering, respiratory rate stable, no narcotics in her chart that morning, and when Ms. Atwood whispered, "Just die already," well, that wasn't grief. That was calculation. Ben looked at me across the table, then back to Kelly. Would you be willing to testify under oath? Kelly didn't hesitate. You bet your ass I would. That night, I sat alone at my dining room table. Kayla was gone. Temporarily, she thought, but she didn't know I'd already changed the locks. The table was bare except for a blank sheet of legal paper and a single pen. My hand trembled less than I expected. Line by line I wrote the new will, clear, simple, all assets to the Whitman Foundation for Women's Independence, remaining savings to a scholarship fund in my late husband's name. Executor Ben Kavanaugh. Kayla. Removed in full. No claim, no clause, no contact. I signed it with the steadiness of a woman reborn. The next morning, Ben called. Brace yourself, he said. What now? She's filed a countersuit. She's claiming you're mentally unfit, dementia, manipulation by your attorney, medical vulnerability. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just smiled, slowly. I guess it's time I remind everyone who's really losing their mind. Next day, I went to the therapist. The office was painted in soft sage and vanilla tones, calm, deliberate choices meant to ease fragile minds. I sat in the middle of the room, posture straight, palms folded in my lap. Across from me, Dr. Claire Henley tapped the cap of her pen against her legal pad, watching me the way a hawk watches the wind. Do you know why you're here, Margaret? I nodded. My daughter believes I've lost my mind. She tilted her head. And have you? I smiled. Not wide, but real. But I've lost my tolerance. She didn't laugh, but her eyes crinkled. The court-ordered mental fitness evaluation had been Kayla's latest move in her unraveling campaign. Ben warned me not to take it personally. I took it strategically instead. We talked for 90 minutes about memory, dates, emotions, history, boundaries. Dr. Henley asked me to count backward by sevens from 100, then to draw a clock, then to name 3 U.S. vice presidents in reverse order. I did all 3, then added a 4th for good measure. When she finally set her pen down, she leaned forward and said, You're not unfit. You're focused and deeply wounded. Will you testify to that? Gladly, she said, but I'll say more than that. I'll say you're lucid, logical, and protecting yourself from someone who sees your age as leverage. I left with a signed statement and an exhale that didn't tremble, but by the time I got home, I had 3 voicemails and 5 missed calls. Kayla had wasted no time launching her next attack, this time through the internet. The first post went live an hour after my evaluation ended. When your elderly parent refuses care and gets manipulated by greedy lawyers, pray for her, elder abuse is real. She posted a photo of me, disheveled mid-blink from the hospital, probably taken just after surgery. The comments were worse. People saying I looked confused, that I probably needed round-the-clock help, that my daughter was so strong for taking it all on. Ben called, voice tight with disgust. She's laying the emotional groundwork for her case, but it'll backfire. Still, it stung. She's building a narrative, I said, so I'll give her a new one. The family dinner had been scheduled weeks ago, Kayla's idea. A rebuilding night, she called it. I RSP'd late, deliberately. She didn't expect me to show. When I walked into the house wearing my pearl earrings and my late husband's navy cardigan, the room quieted like someone had cut the power. Kayla blinked. Mom, you're up and around? I walked from the car, I said, not from the grave. Her fiancé, Doug, stood and awkwardly kissed my cheek. He smelled like bourbon and cologne, an odd cocktail for 6:30 p.m. Dinner was laid out like a magazine spread. Brisket, balsamic glazed carrots, place cards, a performance, every plate carefully plated to mask the rot underneath. I smiled through the salad, chewed my chicken, sipped the sparkling cider Kayla poured like a stewardess on a private jet. Then, midway through dessert, I set my fork down. Calmly. "Kayla?" I said. "Who paid for all this?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "The caterer, the dishes, the centerpiece that looks like it cost half my old mortgage." Doug furrowed his brow. "Didn't you say the house paid for it?" The room froze. Kayla's spine straightened. No. I said we were covering it." Doug looked at me, then at her. "Wait, the house isn't hers?" Her face drained of color. I folded my napkin neatly in my lap. "No, Douglas," I said, voice like glass. "It isn't." I folded my hands over the linen napkin in my lap, studying the gold trim on the dessert plate like it might give me permission to speak, but I didn't need permission. Not anymore. "Did you know," I said gently, "that Mike and I opened a trust fund when Kayla was 15? Doug's brow furrowed. "What kind of trust?" I didn't look at Kayla. Not yet. "Education, primarily. Some real estate protections. It was supposed to help her avoid student loans. Keep her rooted if something ever happened to us." Kayla stiffened, jaw twitching. "You never told me that," she said through her teeth. I finally met her gaze. "That's because you weren't supposed to cash it in like a lottery ticket. It was meant for growth, not extraction." She scoffed. "So what? You're parading your charity now? Trying to humiliate me?" "No," I said. "I'm simply correcting the record. It's a dinner, after all. Thought I'd bring something to the table." Doug shifted in his seat. Something behind his eyes had changed, less smitten, more skeptical. He cleared his throat. "So, is this why you were asking me about the deed the other night?" Kayla shot him a glare. "Doug." "No, really," he said, frowning now. "You said she'd be gone by the holidays, that we could finally use the guest wing." The whole room spun in that single moment. My fork hit my plate with a soft chime. Kayla's shoulders dropped, rage giving way to disbelief that he'd actually said it. "You were planning to evict me by Christmas?" I asked quietly. She stood so abruptly her chair nearly toppled. "You don't get to twist this. You were unwell. You still are. Manipulating everything, turning people against me." I rose too, but calmly, deliberately. My voice didn't shake. "The deed was never yours to weaponize, Kayla. I reversed it 2 weeks ago." Gasps came from somewhere, maybe Doug's mother, maybe my cousin Beth. But my eyes stayed locked on Kayla's. "You forged a will," I continued, "rerouted bills, stole from me while I was recovering from open-heart surgery, and now you're throwing tantrums because I won't die on your timeline." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You want a clean slate?" I said. "Here it is." I turned to the guests, all of them frozen in varying degrees of discomfort and disbelief. The scent of lemon tart mixed with cold tension, and the flicker of candlelight cast long shadows behind every face. "This," I said, gesturing to the curated table and artificial civility, "will be the last dinner at this house, at this table, with things left unsaid." Someone dropped their wine glass. No one apologized for the noise. Kayla grabbed her purse with shaking hands, muttered something vile under her breath, and stormed out, heels stabbing the hardwood with every step. Doug remained seated, red-faced and stunned. He didn't chase her. I sank back into my chair, heart calm despite the wreckage. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan I'd picked out 22 years ago. Every rotation whispered a different name: betrayal, theft, silence, resilience. By morning, I was dressed and standing at the kitchen island, phone in hand, paperwork ready. The realtor answered on the second ring. "Yes," I said. "List it. Cash offer preferred." I'm done with keeping things that were never appreciated. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old pine when I walked through it with the appraiser. Every step echoed too loudly. Empty walls, hollow rooms. The pictures were already boxed. So were the illusions. I'd called the realtor at dawn, and by lunchtime the offers had begun to roll in, faster than I expected. It was a good property in a rising market, but I wasn't after profit. I was after permanence, justice, a clean slate. 2 offers so far, the realtor said, flipping through her tablet. One's from a flipper, wants to gut it, relist in 6 weeks. The other's from a non-profit. They run transitional housing for women getting out of domestic abuse situations. I froze. The house suddenly felt heavier, like every floorboard remembered more than it let on. Can you send me the nonprofit's proposal? I asked. She nodded, tapping her screen. They said they'd keep most of the structure intact, add safety doors, security lighting. But the bones? They like the bones. So did I once. That night, I sat at the old kitchen table, the one Kayla never wanted but Mike refused to replace. I opened the nonprofit's brochure on my laptop, photos of women in donated coats, their children curled against their legs, a mission statement, a safe return to dignity. The words blurred, not from the screen but from memory. Flashback. It was 1994 and I was standing in line at a shelter on Grove Street with a 4-year-old Kayla clutching my thigh. The divorce had been final for 3 days. I had $57, no job, and a car that stalled every third start. That shelter had been my last option, my first act of survival. I remembered the smell of cafeteria chili, the scratch of donated sheets, the quiet dignity of other women folding their pain into resilience. They taught me to write a resume, to breathe again, to forgive myself for falling. I never forgot. The next morning, I called Ben. I want to update my will again, I said. His tone was warm but curious. What are we changing now? I'm leaving the house proceeds and my remaining assets to vetted nonprofits, women's shelters, elder justice programs, people who rebuild, not just take. No family beneficiaries? He asked carefully. None, I said. The bloodline ends with me. The legacy starts there. There was a long pause, then a low hum of respect. I'll draft it tonight. Later that afternoon, I stood at the front window, sipping lukewarm tea when I heard shouting. Kayla. Her voice cut through the neighborhood calm like a siren, sharp and furious. I didn't move, just watched. She was in the yard, flailing her arms at the realtor and 2 non-profit reps. Her hair was windblown, mascara smudged. A neighbor across the street, Doris in the yellow duplex, stood on her porch, phone raised. You don't get to sell my house, Kayla shrieked, her voice cracking. It's not yours, the realtor said flatly. The deed's been corrected. I cared for her, Kayla spat. One of the non-profit women, mid-30s, quiet strength, stepped forward. This house will be a place of healing now. You should be proud of that. Kayla lunged, but Doug stepped between them, trying to pull her back. He looked embarrassed, a man reevaluating his future in real time. I didn't film. I didn't cheer. I simply sipped my tea, warm despite the cold room. 2 hours later, the video surfaced on a community forum. By evening, it was being shared on TikTok and Facebook. Entitled Daughter Melts Down Over Mother's House Sale to Women's Shelter. The comments rolled in. This is what generational selfishness looks like. Karma in real time? That mother is a queen. I closed my laptop, exhaled through a tight chest, and let my hand hover over my heart. No, I wasn't a queen. I was a survivor with receipts. Next day, I was invited to speak on a local podcast about elder fraud. The podcast mic smelled like cheap foam and lemon sanitizer. My palms were dry, but my voice steady. I adjusted the headphones over my ears as the host, a local woman named Trina Miller, gave me a nod. We're live in 3, 2... A red light blinked on. Today's guest is Margaret Atwood, not the novelist, but a woman whose story is grabbing headlines for all the right reasons. I cleared my throat. Not headlines, just hard-earned truths. She smiled. Let's get into it. For the next 40 minutes I told the story. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to make someone else sitting in silence finally speak. How I trusted a daughter who weaponized power of attorney. How forged documents and bank transfers nearly wiped out a lifetime. How silence doesn't protect, it poisons. Trina leaned in toward her mic. What would you say to others going through something similar? I didn't hesitate. Don't mistake love for leverage. Protect yourself, even from the ones you raised. When we ended, she took off her headphones and whispered, "That wasn't just brave. That was necessary." The episode dropped the next morning. Within hours, my email flooded. Strangers, seniors, women my age, men older, people saying things they'd never said aloud. My son did the same. I thought I was alone. You made me call my lawyer today. Even Trina's producer forwarded a note from a retired judge. She should run a workshop. Or Congress. But it wasn't all praise. Kayla's attorney, her third one by now, sent a cease and desist email claiming defamation of character. Ben read it and laughed. You've got hospital records, court filings, eyewitness testimony, and video of her screaming in a front yard. Let them try. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Kayla had wanted the world's sympathy. She got its scrutiny instead. That afternoon, a TV station called, then a digital news outlet. I declined both. The message had been shared. This wasn't about exposure, it was about consequence. The nonprofit tagged me in a thank you post online, a photo of the house's new nameplate, The Grove House, where healing begins. I stared at the image until my vision blurred, until the old floor plan in my memory overlapped with something holy and whole. The mailbox surprised me, not the bills or the circulars, but a soft pink envelope with no return address. Handwritten, elegant, like something from another era. I opened it slowly, carefully. Margaret, you don't know me, but I used to be Kayla's closest friend. That was before she turned vindictive, bitter, and, yes, dangerous. I walked away years ago, but I kept something I think you should see, something she never meant for anyone to find. You need to see what I found. Erica, I read it twice, then again. The handwriting never wavered. The final line was underlined. You need to see what I found. I folded the letter, heart drumming low and thick in my chest. I didn't know what Erica had uncovered, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I listened to the first recording in the quietest room I had left, the small back office that still smelled faintly of vanilla candles and printer ink. The walls were bare now, my old photos boxed away, but the silence had weight. Erica's email had come with an attachment. 3 voice memos, each one labeled with a date. The earliest was from 10 months ago. The last, just weeks before I went in for surgery. I clicked play. Kayla's voice spilled out like acid wrapped in sugar. It's not fraud if she's barely conscious half the time. She doesn't even remember what she signs. A laugh. Besides, I know how to match her handwriting. I've done it before. Letters, birthday cards. Easy. I paused it, breathed, rewound, played it again. The second recording was worse. Ben? That lawyer? He thinks he's clever, but he won't touch me. By the time she croaks, I'll have everything in my name. Property, bonds, even the damn artwork. It's just paper trails and timing. The voice was unmistakably hers. Clear, cocky, cruel. But the third file, that was the dagger. I rerouted the home insurance to her old account, then dumped the taxes in her name too. If anyone checks, it looks like she's just behind on payments. That's the beauty of it. People assume the old ones just forget. I stared at the screen, bile rising in the back of my throat. No lawyer could argue that. No daughter could explain it away. By 9 a.m., I was in Ben's office, voice shaking only from adrenaline. He listened with headphones, taking notes in neat cursive blocks. He didn't blink until the final file ended. That's it, he said. This is the nail. We submit it to the state attorney general. Fraud, elder abuse, tax evasion, maybe wire fraud, depending on how she moved the funds. Will they act? They'll have no choice, he said, his jaw set. It's not just a family matter anymore. This is criminal. I left his office lighter than I'd walked in. Not triumphant, but finally grounded. Like the floor beneath me had solidified. Instead of going home, I drove to Rosewood Cemetery. The sky was cloudless, sharp blue above the quiet rows of headstones. I hadn't visited Mike's grave since the surgery. Somehow, it felt like now was the right time. I knelt beside the etched marble, running my fingers across his name like a worn book spine. "I handled it," I said softly. "She almost won, but not quite." A breeze brushed the hem of my coat. The scent of cut grass and lilies lingered in the air. "I remember when we talked about legacy," I murmured. "It wasn't supposed to look like this. But maybe this is what legacy really means, choosing who gets your story, not who shares your blood." I stayed until the sun dipped low, painting long shadows across the names of the gone. That night my phone buzzed. Blocked number. Just a single message. "Kayla, you'll regret this." I stared at the screen for a long moment. No panic, no sting, just a calm resolve. I typed back 2 words. "Me." "You already do." I hit send, then turned the phone off. The knock came at Kayla's door at 6:42 a.m. IRS agents, crisp suits and tighter expressions. A neighbor would later post a blurry photo of them walking in with laptops and sealed envelopes. By noon, her accounts were frozen. By sunset, I had 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Ben forwarded the official notice. Federal audit initiated under allegations of financial misappropriation, tax fraud, and elder exploitation. It was happening, and not in secret, like everything she had done to me. This was loud, documented, with consequences that didn't fade under a new coat of charm. Ben called that evening. "The subpoena pulled more than we expected," he said, voice buzzing with quiet triumph. "Bank records, tax returns, even offshore accounts under shell LLCs she registered last year. Her paper trail isn't just sloppy, it's radioactive." I said nothing for a moment, just closed my eyes and let the truth settle where fear used to live. What does that mean? It means this doesn't end in a slap on the wrist, Margaret. This ends in court, and she won't be holding the gavel. That weekend, I received a letter from the nonprofit that had bought the house. The Grove House. Inside was an invitation, gold foil on thick cream cardstock. "We'd be honored if you'd attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony. You helped make this possible." So I went. The air smelled like fresh paint and lemon polish when I stepped into my former living room, now converted into a shared counseling space. The mantel that once held dusty family photos now bore soft lighting and books with titles like Starting Over and Grace in the Ashes. I didn't cry. Not then. My tears had been used up in private years ago. Instead, I smiled at the woman who welcomed me. Sasha, the new director. She guided me from room to room. A nursery in my old office, a healing garden where Kayla's childhood swing set once stood. When we reached the foyer, Sasha gestured toward a mounted bronze plaque. "In honor of the women who rise," it read. Below it, "Donated by Margaret Atwood." "Would you like to sign it?" she asked, handing me a pen. I placed my initials beside the engraving, steady and unshaken. Later that night, I returned home to an envelope slipped beneath my door. No name, just an official court seal. I opened it carefully, like it might burn my hands. Inside, State versus Kayla Marie Atwood. Trial date, confirmed. Charges, pending final discovery review. Minimum recommended sentencing, 2 to 5 years probation. Possible restitution, community service. I stared at the paper as the porch light buzzed above me. No anger, no joy, just the clean, cold certainty that justice no longer lived in theory. The courtroom was beige and bloodless, the kind of space designed to drain feeling. But the weight in the air was impossible to sterilize. It clung to the edges of the gallery like humidity, thick with history, heartbreak, and the unspoken things a mother never dreams of saying in public. Kayla walked in wearing a pale gray suit, too polished, too soft for someone whose lies now had timestamps and decibel levels. Her hair was curled in perfect waves, and she smiled at the bailiff like she was checking into a hotel. I didn't look away, but I didn't smile back. Ben leaned in beside me, murmuring, "She's going to play it like a soap opera. You just stay steady." I nodded. I had no lines to memorize. The truth never needed rehearsing. Opening statements were predictably dramatic. Kayla's attorney painted her as a devoted daughter, overwhelmed by care duties, managing declining health and confused communication. I wanted to laugh. I didn't. Ben's response was cold and methodical. "We are here today not because of emotional confusion, but financial clarity. Every wire transfer, every forged form, every falsified tax return. The truth in this case doesn't hide. It's itemized." Then came the exhibits. Bank statements, digital signatures, voice recordings, Kayla bragging about her schemes, her disdain for old people logic. The gallery was silent. No one coughed. No one whispered. Then the nurse took the stand. Jane, her uniform pressed, voice firm. I heard Kayla Atwood say, "Just die already." I was entering the room with her meds. Margaret Atwood was fully conscious. She opened her eyes seconds later. Kayla flinched. Then came Derek, Kayla's ex, unexpected witness. He stepped forward in worn jeans and a trembling voice. "She told me she hoped her mom wouldn't wake up, said the paperwork was ready, she just needed the body to catch up. I didn't believe her at first. I thought she was just angry. But then she showed me a document with a forged signature. That's when I ended it." The courtroom rustled. Even the judge adjusted in his chair. My turn. The bailiff called my name. The walk to the witness box felt longer than the surgery hallway. I sat, folded my hands. My voice didn't shake. When you love someone, you expect conflict, not betrayal. I paused. Let them listen. I raised Kayla as a single mother for 14 years. I worked night shifts to keep her enrolled in private school. I paid her tuition with credit cards. I gave her my passwords, my power of attorney. I trusted her, and she weaponized that trust. I turned slightly, not quite facing Kayla, but not avoiding her either. She didn't need money. She needed control. That's what this trial is about. Control disguised as care. The judge nodded once. No more questions. Kayla took the stand last. Her voice cracked before she even finished her full name. Her mascara was waterproof, but her voice wasn't. "I never meant to hurt her," she said, eyes glassy. "She was sick. She didn't know what she was doing. I was trying to manage everything and I panicked. Some of those things were exaggerated, the recordings, taken out of context." The prosecutor didn't interrupt, just handed her a printed transcript of her own words. "Which context fits, by the time she croaks, I'll have everything in my name." Kayla didn't answer. Her silence was louder than the gavel that followed. When the verdict came, the room didn't erupt. No gasps, no cries. Just the sound of the judge's voice, clear and final. In favor of the plaintiff, Margaret Atwood, on all counts. Outside, the air tasted like rain on concrete, metallic, cleansing. Ben turned to me. "Sentencing is in 30 days. I nodded. "I can wait." Because now, so would she. In the evening, I wrote a letter addressed to Kayla. The letter began like any other I had written her. Kayla. But this one didn't have warmth in its folds. It had weight. I sat at the dining table that no longer had her voice bouncing off its corners. The room was still, except for the low hum of the heater and the scratch of my pen. The fire in the hearth crackled softly behind me, warm and indifferent. The words came slowly. Not angry, not bitter, but bare. "You were my everything before you even opened your eyes. I imagined your name before I had a crib for you. I believed motherhood would teach me how to be strong. But it turns out, it taught me how to be invisible. Piece by piece. I included no accusations, just truths. When I paid your tuition, I skipped dentist appointments. When I let you stay home from college during that rough year, I worked overtime so you wouldn't see me cry from exhaustion. I kept waiting for the moment when you'd see it, the love in the sacrifices." I paused, tapped the pen twice against the table. I slipped the final page into the envelope, along with something else. A copy of the hospital bill, her name at the top, my account number at the bottom, $9,742.13. No note, no annotation, just the raw arithmetic of what she walked away from. I held the envelope over the flames, watched the edges curl, blacken, and vanish. I didn't feel triumphant, just clean. Some things aren't worth mailing, some goodbyes only matter to the sender. The next morning, I received an email from a professor at the university upstate, someone who had heard my podcast interview. Would you be willing to speak to our senior class about resilience, legacy, and rebuilding after betrayal? I read the line twice, then smiled. On the day of the lecture, I wore navy slacks and the scarf Mike gave me on our last anniversary. The auditorium smelled like pencil shavings, microwaved coffee, and curiosity. I stood behind the podium, looking out over rows of young eyes, some tired, some guarded, all watching. Not just listening, but measuring. My story isn't unique, I began, but the silence that followed it? That's what hurts people the most. Silence makes room for shame. Speaking up doesn't fix everything, but it breaks that silence. I told them about the forgery, the bank accounts, the moment in the hospital when my daughter thought I was unconscious, and I told them what I did with that pain. I didn't name her. I didn't need to. The power wasn't in the detail. It was in the choice to live forward. When I stepped down from the stage, a girl no older than 20 approached me, tears pooling but not falling. "My mom's going through something like this," she whispered. "You made me feel like she's not weak for fighting back." I squeezed her hand. "She's not." As I walked out, the moderator caught up with me holding a clipboard. "Just one last question for the school blog, if you don't mind." "Go ahead. If you had the chance, would you press criminal charges against her?" I paused on the sidewalk, looking out at the bare trees flanking the quad. The wind lifted the edge of my coat like a question waiting to be answered. The courthouse air was crisp with finality. A different kind of silence lingered this time. No buzz of lawyers prepping witnesses, no pounding adrenaline in my chest. Just the shuffle of papers, a quick nod from Ben, and the soft click of my pen as I signed the withdrawal of all remaining civil claims. I didn't need more. Not another ruling, not another fight. Justice had already come. Quietly, persistently. In truth, brought to light, in dignity, reclaimed, and in walking away with everything that mattered. Kayla didn't show up for the final hearing. Her attorney appeared instead, ashen-faced, announcing that she'd accepted the court's alternative sentencing, 2 years of community service and a court-mandated financial ethics program. I imagined her cleaning graffiti from benches or sitting through lectures on moral obligations between relatives. It wasn't prison, but it was fitting. She'd have to study the very things she used to manipulate. A poetic irony not lost on me. 3 days later, I made an anonymous donation to the Elder Safety and Advocacy Fund. It wasn't grand, but it was enough to launch 2 new outreach officers. I didn't need my name on a plaque. I just wanted fewer people to feel what I had, powerless, disbelieved, discarded. I'd once thought silence was the only weapon I had left. Now I knew better. Quiet could also be a kindness, and sometimes kindness stung sharper than revenge. The email came in the middle of the night. Subject: Your story, our strength. Body: over 2 million views. 8,000 shares. Thank you. The university had posted my lecture, my inbox filled with notes from strangers. I watched it with my mom. "You gave me the courage to confront my brother. Thank you for surviving out loud." I cried, not because they saw me, but because they heard me. That same week, I finalized the paperwork for the Michael Atwood Legacy Scholarship in memory of the only man who ever made me feel like a teammate, not a burden. The scholarship would be need-based for students raised by single parents, with preference to those studying law, social work, or elder care. He would have liked that. He always said justice should serve the vulnerable first. I signed the form and whispered to his photo, "We did something good, love." The cottage was smaller than any home I'd lived in, but it was all mine. White shutters, a pale blue door, seagrass curling along the stone path like shy fingers. Inside, the floors creaked in all the right ways. Salt from the breeze dusted the windowsills. I'd brought only essentials, books, blankets, memories I chose to keep. The first night, I lit a candle and let the ocean air slip through the screen door. My chest felt hollow, but not from sadness, from release. I watched a crab scuttle across the sand. A boy's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. A soft life, an earned quiet. I'd just poured tea the next morning when I heard it. A rustle at the front door. Not a knock. Not footsteps. Paper. I opened the door and found an envelope. No postage. No return address. My name, in her handwriting. Kayla. The curve of the M in Margaret was shaky. The ink blotched near the bottom corner. She must have written it by hand, sat somewhere, alone, and decided this would be the last word. I stared at it, fingers tightening. It felt heavier than it looked, not because of the weight, because of the history. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter like a loaded question. For 3 days I didn't touch it, not out of fear, out of clarity. I no longer needed to open every door someone knocked on. Still, that morning, with the ocean humming beyond the window and the smell of cinnamon toast curling through the cottage, I slit the envelope open with a butter knife. The paper inside trembled slightly as I unfolded it. Mom, I don't know if this means anything anymore. Maybe it never did. But I'm sorry. I was scared. Of debt. Of being ordinary. Of ending up like you. And now? Now I'd give anything to have your peace, to sit next to you in a quiet room and not feel shame buzz between us. I was wrong. You didn't fail me. I failed you. Love. Kayla. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, but not careless. No excuses, no dramatic pleas, just the bare bones of accountability, finally scribbled down when there was nothing left to gain. I folded the letter once, neatly, then again. Then I walked to the cedar chest under the front window, unlocked it, and placed the letter inside. I locked it again without hesitation. Some things deserve to be remembered, but not relived. That afternoon, I walked to the beach with a thermos of coffee and a paperback tucked under my arm. The sand was warm beneath my bare feet. Kids shrieked and splashed in the shallows, plastic buckets filling with dreams and seawater. One little girl ran past me, chasing a kite that kept dipping dangerously toward the sand. Her father followed, calling her name, Annie. He caught my eye, breathless. She never slows down. I smiled. That's the best kind of child? He laughed. You new around here? Just recently settled in, I said. Margaret? Peter? He nodded. If you ever need anything, tools, rides, or someone to argue about baseball with, just knock. At sunset, I returned to the cottage and opened the last box in the living room. It was labeled in my handwriting, Will plus Personal Docs. Inside, my old will sat on top. The one I signed years ago, when I still believed Kayla would take care of me the way I once took care of her. I placed it gently into the shredder. Then I pulled out a clean form, clicked my pen, and began again. No mention of Kayla. No trust transfers. No open-ended loopholes. Instead, I left what little I had: savings, royalties from the scholarship's licensing, a small coastal property fund, to 3 organizations. The women's shelter that now stood where my old home once did, the Elder Advocacy Center, and the scholarship program in Mike's name. I also included a small endowment for the local library where children could read in warm chairs by bright windows and forget, for a while, that the world could ever be cruel. I signed the final page, pressed my palm over the signature, exhaled. The tide was pulling in when I stepped outside. Light glinted off the sea like the whole horizon was winking at me. I didn't feel old anymore. I felt authored, like a story finally finished on my own terms.